Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. Welcome back to another episode of The PA is In. If you have ever been curious about entrepreneurship or wondered what it takes to go from full-time clinician to full-time entrepreneur and are looking for someone to pull back the curtain and share with you their experience about what it's like to go from an employee to self-employed in entrepreneurship, I'm excited to welcome back to the show Caleb Pepperday. He went from W-2 employee to financial planner running his own firm, and he's here to tell us how he prepared financially and mentally for that transition. Without further ado, here he is, Caleb Pepperday. Caleb, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here.
So if you could take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners, tell us about you and who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I am a financial planner. I own Advanced Practice Planning, which is primarily focused on helping mid-career physician assistants, and then also, ironically enough, which is part of this conversation here today, of the entrepreneur physician assistant too. And so really what I help is with everything from tax planning. I don't file tax returns or anything like that, but I help you, make sure you're doing the right things to make, the most of your money while not giving Uncle Sam more than what you need to. And then also, making sure that we're doing once we do have those extra dollars, what do we do to make sure that we're optimizing those and growing for the long term? So that's what I help clients with all around the country. I'm a virtual firm working with, like I said, PAs nationwide. So excited to be here and excited to talk through a little bit more of this entrepreneur path.
Yeah. So I would love it if you would take an opportunity to talk to us about your journey in terms of from employee to business owner and what that looked like for you as a financial planner.
Yeah, great question. I like to say I'm an accidental entrepreneur, and I think you see that a lot of times with entrepreneurs. And really, it's never been easier to be an entrepreneur, especially in the U.S. with all the different technologies and kind of COVID has pushed things along with working remotely and what have you. But what had really kind of pushed me towards entrepreneurship was I always wanted to help people in the medical field. So my brother's a physician, his wife is a nurse practitioner, my wife is a PA. And what I've found was that not a whole lot of PAs weren't really, getting the help that they needed when it came to their personal finances. And that really bothered me. A lot of times whenever I worked at different firms, they were focused on kind of the high net worth clients or people that were getting ready to retire, but there wasn't a niche focused on really medical providers in general. And so what I found was that, PAs were my group, my people. And, that's kind of how I got down that path. And so fast forward, I've been a planner here since 2018 and been in business, my advanced practice planning coming up on 2 years here in July. So that is, that's kind of my background, where I came from and why I wanted to start what I did. And the other piece too, and I think this resonates with a lot of entrepreneurs, is that I wanted to have some autonomy of what I do. Like I said, who I work with, what the technology I use to work with clients, how I meet with clients, and really all those different types of factors kind of built into why I wanted to start my own business. And I feel that's probably a fairly similar mantra, so to speak, for most entrepreneurs, where they have the entrepreneurial spirit and they want to kind of do things independently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the beauty of that is that you get to make all the choices. And the hard part about that is that you have to make all the choices.
You find that out the hard way through trial and error, right? So there's no one to, I'm lucky to be a part of some groups and some organizations where I can bounce ideas off of other advisors and things like that. But there is a certain aspect of self curiosity and helping yourself figure out problems, because there's not necessarily anybody that's going to come and save you, so to speak. So that's something I would say for PAs that are, or really medical providers that are looking to go down the entrepreneurial path, to know that a lot of it is going to be on you to figure things out. There isn't going to be somebody coming to save the day. If that's something that you can tackle, then I would encourage it. But on the flip side of, if that scares you, then maybe entrepreneurship isn't necessarily the best path for you.
Yeah, all the risk, all the reward, and all the responsibility sort of falls on you when you're running your own business. So, did you used to be employed? And if so, how did you sort of prepare for this transition to be ready to be not unemployed, but self-employed?
Yeah, so I worked at two different firms before I originally started my practice here, and what I found was that like I said, it wasn't really working with the clients that I wanted to work with, and then that was what helped me build up my framework to again start my own practice. And so while I was still employed and had a salary, in my free time, right, I was doing market research. I was figuring out, if I actually had a minimum viable product that, people were interested in, and that was conducting interviews with PAs or other people in the medical field, getting involved in groups and really just kind of testing my theory out before I pulled the Band-Aid off. And like you said, whenever you rip the Band-Aid off, especially in my field, the great part is you're an entrepreneur, but the bad part is you start at zero. So you have to, be able to work backwards. And really, if your personal finances aren't figured out, then the entrepreneurship might be short-lived, unfortunately. So that is a big piece of the puzzle of having things figured out personally before you jump down into the exciting path of running your own business.
And I would echo that, even in making changes to your personal income or things that you're going to do differently in your personal life. If you're getting ready to make a big shift, like have another baby or change jobs or move or do anything that is sort of big, scary, and also has the tendency to be expensive or impact your cash flow, is that the more flexibility you have, the more of that financial margin that you have baked into your life, the less stressful it is. It doesn't make it not stressful at all to have a baby or move across the country or change jobs or start a business. But what it does do is it gives you the freedom to make those choices from a position of margin and space, and knowing that you have a longer runway to make something profitable, or more time to find another job, or that moving is expensive. So whatever those things are, the more margin you have in your personal finances, the more sort of brave I feel like you can be in the decisions that you make. Did you find that in your experience?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the interesting part, and this is kind of timely right now with what's going on economically, but one of the big fears, we haven't really seen it in a little while, but when there is concerns about employment, and you are a W-2 employee somewhere, I mean, your job is kind of by nature always at risk. And being an entrepreneur, and depending on what exactly you're doing, but for me, for example, I have clients, a bunch of different clients, right? So, my income is fairly stable in the sense that, unless I lose a bunch of clients, I'm not going to just, kind of get fired, so to speak, or get laid off. Whereas that's always a risk, regardless of the field you're in a W-2 environment. So I always kind of look at the self-employment route it's risky, but at the same time, it's risky not to be self-employed as well. So it's an interesting way to look at things, but it is something to consider where, for me, for example, like I knew if this didn't work out as starting my own business, the worst case scenario was I just went and got another job as a financial planner at a firm. And I think that that's a very real possibility for a lot of PAs as well. Of worst case scenario is you just get another job as a PA. It might not be exactly what you would want to do initially, or might not be the best circumstance, but the job security for the most part, based off of trends, seem to be there.
Yeah. And I would say the thing about being an entrepreneur is that it's very obvious that it all depends on you and that it's volatile in a different way, and that you are sort of in charge of your destiny in terms of getting clients and landing them and bringing in income. Whereas when you're an employee, you're also still dependent on your ability to add value and prove yourself in terms of for your employer, for, providing value, for rounding, for dropping charges, for seeing patients. It's just, I think that we have been led to believe that working for someone else is quote unquote better or less risky. But if there's anything that the 5 years since COVID has taught us, it's that we don't really know what's going to happen. And if there are things that can affect the healthcare system in general, the economy, our specific employer that we are not in control of. Like, you can be doing a great job, and if your employer is filing bankruptcy or can't employ people because of the way that reimbursement is, it's not up to you whether or not you stay in that position. You're not maybe as in control or as safe as you thought simply because you have a job as an employee.
Yeah, that's the one area where I would say as a physician assistant, where you can kind of almost do it in stages, right? Of you don't necessarily have to pull the Band-Aid all at once and say, hey, next Monday I'm an entrepreneur, I'm starting my own business, and I'm leaving my employer. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to build up income on the side as a PA, and then if it becomes a path that you think that you can do full time, I mean, that's when you can kind of make the transition. It makes the transition less painful as far as, one, to your personal finances, but then also, just a stress level of, that it is going to work because you've proven it, and you're not just kind of jumping into it without having done the research.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there is someone listening who is thinking about making a change, moving to a position that pays less, changing employers, starting a business, how can we look at our finances and know or be pretty certain that we're ready to make an income adjustment?
The first thing I would say, and this is more of a qualitative thing, is if you are married or have a significant other, make sure that they're on board. What I see a lot of times is that one partner jumps down the path of wanting to be an entrepreneur, but the other person, they're supporting them. But when times get tough, it's easier to it's easier to blame maybe one of the partners that isn't necessarily bringing in the income that they maybe once were, or just what have you in that scenario. So fortunately, my situation was, that was something that I talked with my wife, Rachel, about extensively, to just make sure that everybody was on board and knew the time frame of, what that looked like to get up the ramp up to profitability. So I think that is probably one of the biggest things I would advocate for people that are trying to go down the entrepreneurial path, is to make sure that if you have family involved, that one, they're taken care of, and then two, that they're actually on board with what you want to do. And then the second piece too, and this might sound obvious, but you want to make sure that you give yourself some runway. A lot of businesses just kind of, bleed out, so to speak, of just kind of running out of personal cash. And so for me personally, I had, our situation was different because my wife had a full-time job, but I knew my piece of the puzzle, what I was bringing to our overall income, that I had at least a year's worth of income set aside, that if I didn't make any money for a year, we would still be 100% okay with, with basically me making zero income for the first year. And, luckily that ramped up way faster than what I had anticipated. But I would say it's better to be on the conservative side of things rather than, saying, all right, I have 10 grand sitting in my bank account. I think that's enough to make things work. You want to make sure that you give yourself some runway, and whether you plan for it or not, what I've found is that expenses just from the business side end up being, anywhere from 10 to 20% more than what you anticipated. So giving yourself a buffer there as well is super important. So that would be what I would say from the personal income side of things. The other side is that you want to make sure that you have your budget dialed in. And what I see a lot of times with budgeting, I'll just be frank with you, budgeting sucks. It's not a fun thing to do. There are people out there that love sitting down and looking at a spreadsheet. I mean, I enjoy it, but there are times where I'm like, yeah, this is daunting. But what I think you need to do is get an honest understanding of where your budget sits and where your income is going and where you're spending money, whether it's on discretionary goods or spending on necessities, and getting real with yourself of, what can I continue and what can I cut out? A lot of times what I see is people will say, ask them just surface level, how much do you spend? Oh, well, I spend about $8,000 a month. And then when you kind of break it down, they spend maybe $3,000 on a mortgage and maybe $5,000 or $100,000 or $1,000, on a car payment. And then like after that, they don't really know where the money goes. So there's no real way around it. You have to budget. You have to figure out, especially as an entrepreneur, where your expenses are going personally before you can kind of dive into the one, taking a hit, from your personal income side of things, but then also potentially taking a hit from your savings if you're not making any money immediately. So those are my three recommendations for people that are wanting to go down this path.
Are you feeling stuck, burned out, or craving a little more flexibility and financial freedom? You're not alone. So many clinicians feel trapped in the grind, overworked, underpaid, and unsure how to pivot. But here's the truth. Your skills are valuable beyond the clinic. That's why I created the 48 Side Gig Ideas for Healthcare Providers Guide, a free PDF packed with practical, creative, and immediately cash-generating ideas that you can start right now. From telehealth to medical writing and patient advocacy to app development, and even a little note on podcasting, these things aren't fluff. These are real, proven opportunities that other providers are already doing. You don't have to figure it out alone. This guide will help you explore new passions, learn how to make extra money, and make the first step towards multiple income streams and building the life and career you actually want. Download your free copy today at tracybingaman.com/gig or click the link in the show notes and start creating financial freedom and cash flow flexibility on your own terms. Because you, my friend, are more than just your clinical job, and taking the first step to generating alternative revenue streams is waiting for you inside the Side Gig Guide. Find it now in the show notes. Absolutely. I love a budget. I am the exception. I just feel better knowing what's coming in and what is going out. It brings me joy to see us making progress towards our goals, but it also brings me this huge sense of peace that I know that we're okay because I have a finger on the pulse of our family's finances. I get that spreadsheets are not everyone's jam, so I know that that is not true for every listener. However, it is really good to know, even if you don't enjoy it, that it's just one of those things that if you do it and you know, then you can work backwards and say, hey, here's what we're spending on things that we don't necessarily need. So our income could go to this without sacrificing, anything. It could go to this for sacrificing some of the things that we do and enjoy, but don't necessarily need during this period of transition. And, I think that stressed work is not our best work. So if you start a business and walk away from your full-time income and go from $120,000 a year to zero, and you don't have this buffer of time and saved money and this, emergency fund or account that you can live out of in the meantime, you're going to feel like desperate and panicked to make money in a way that hasn't been proven yet, as opposed to, if you step down slowly, if you have that buffer, you can try things and have some things not work and figure out what does work and do it in a way that is not just so stressed. Because ultimately, entrepreneurship should be a blessing to your life if you do it in a way that is thoughtful and strategic, and it should make your life less stressful. It's not without stresses, but if you do it strategically, you can do it in a way that ends up being a blessing, ends up giving you more time and more control in your life.
Yeah, entrepreneurship is already stressful enough. You don't want to add your personal income stresses to that as well, your personal finances. And the other piece of that too is you have to give yourself a big enough runway, and not just when it comes to finances, right? You have to give yourself enough runway to stick with, going down this path. So, if you think that you're gonna, give yourself 6 months, for example, to become an entrepreneur, I've probably got news for you. That's probably not long enough, right? So you need to give yourself some runway, probably realistically a couple years, until you kind of really see yourself hit your stride. And that's kind of what I've seen throughout my couple years in business here, just, personally, is that the first year is like, it's super exciting. You're like, I'm doing this. I'm finally, going out on my own. The second year, you're kind of like, what did I do? What a dumb idea this was. And then kind of you start to come out of that, and you're like, wow, this is actually kind of working. We're making it work. We're figuring it out. And then you kind of hit your stride, whether it's the end of year 2 or start of year 3. And then, you're kind of off to the races. But what I find is a lot of people give up before they ever get to that piece where they have the breakthrough. And I want to make sure that if you are going to go down this path, it's something that you shouldn't take lightly and just think that it's, we're going to maybe just give it a couple months. You have to commit to it, because if you don't commit to it, it's not going to commit to you.
Yeah. And I think for all of the wonderful things that the internet and digital marketing and social media has given us, I also think it has given us this view of people saying things like, I launched a business last month and this month I'm making $30,000 in revenue. And then you show up and you're trying things and you're figuring it out and you're serving some people, but that $30,000 a month is not happening, right? You're 3 weeks in and you're like, well, this doesn't seem to be making any traction at all. And having a realistic view of the work that it actually takes. So when people are saying like, oh, I'm just making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month from my phone, like while my kids are napping, I'm working 4 hours a week. Like realistically, it's going to take more time and more effort to figure it out. And I have found what a lot of entrepreneurs do is they find something that people want and then they serve them in a capacity that is one-on-one before we get to that one-to-many, before we get to that ability to scale. And then we're working so hard to generate a slice of what we used to make as a provider or a part of what we were earning when we were working full-time clinically and feeling like we're kind of spinning our wheels. Did you experience like growing pains with trying to figure out like what's the ideal amount of clients and how much time you're spending in your business and boundaries and all of those things with working from home?
Yeah, one of the things that as you were talking there, I'm actually working through a book now. It's called The Company of One. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but I believe the guy's name is Paul Jarvis that wrote it. But the idea of the book is that working for yourself, it's okay to not want to build a enterprise, so to speak. It's okay to keep things small and intentional. And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do with my business, is that I want to, have my business work for me, and I don't want to work for my business. And I think that that's a really important distinction, because it's very easy to get down the path of, especially as you get down further into entrepreneurship, of there are going to be growing pains where you just run out of time to do certain things, or that you might not be an expert in certain areas, or just things like that I think end up, you either one have to invest in technology or invest in employees, and then all of a sudden you become being an employee for yourself, or being an employer for yourself, to all of a sudden being responsible for other people and their ability to pay their house payment, or pay their mortgage, or pay their car payment, or what have you. So I think it's important to understand, and this is hard to do prior, but at least if you have a good idea of what you're trying to build, just because people on the internet or social media tells you that you need to have this giant practice, it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to fit for you and your lifestyle and what you're trying to build. So what I've found with my wife and I is we have figured out the number that we need to be financially comfortable and still meet our long-term goals. And then we've kind of backed into, all right, what does that look like for my business? And also my wife, her working into the future. What is that going to look like as well? Of, here's the income number we need to meet. Now, how are we going to use the combination of her salary and my business to make that work? And I think that's a little bit different than maybe the typical entrepreneur, or the typical American spirit of, hey, let's just make as much money as we can, and we'll figure out the rest later. And what I've seen just working with people in personal finances, that more money, I mean, at a certain threshold doesn't make you happier, but past that, it just, it doesn't necessarily add additional benefits to your life as much as what you would think.
You know that connection is one of my core values. So when I saw that Sermo created a new space for APPs specifically, I jumped at the chance to join. I joined because it's a space built specifically for PAs and NPs, a community where I could connect with providers who actually get it. I was drawn in by the opportunity to share insights, hear real stories, and honestly, also by the chance to earn a little extra money through surveys. And let me tell you, it's been worth it. In less than a year, I've made over $1,000 just by sharing my expertise in answering surveys. But beyond the income, the biggest value of the Sermo APP community has been realizing that I am not alone. Seeing what others are going through, whether it's burnout, work-life balance struggles, or even clinical challenges, and celebrating their successes. It has made such a difference in how I approach my career. If you're looking for a reliable additional income stream and a vetted community of like-minded providers, Sermo is where you need to be. It's the best place to learn about trends, see how others are doing, and make strong connections. Sign up today using the link in the show notes and join me inside this community of clinicians. And you'll even get a $20 bonus just for joining. Because in medicine, we're stronger together. Yeah. I have a friend that calls that the enough point. And to me, the enough point is, it's financial, but it's also, if you've reached a certain level at work and they're offering you a promotion or this opportunity to earn more or do more, work more, and you sort of say, does that align with what I want for myself, for my career, for my family? And sort of really truly assess, I would earn more, but I would work more. And if you're at the point where you feel like you already work enough, or maybe you work too much, like taking that promotion to earn more, but it's going to cost you more time, like maybe you're already at your enough point in terms of what you're bringing in. And also like, no, I think I'm giving enough hours to this job. I think I'm giving enough to this, place that is not a priority to me. It's just where I go to exchange time for money. And I'd rather spend more time at home. And being strategic about what you value and what matters to you it's a very novel approach to life, because more is not necessarily better when it comes to, more clients, more products, more, customers, more hours spent working for someone else is maybe not what you want to do if you know what that enough point is for you and your family.
What I can say is as someone that helps plan for retirement as well is I've seen, there's different ranges here, but when I see people that have accumulated a lot of money and they look to retire early, a lot of times once they actually get into retirement, they go and they do the vacation, they travel to Europe, they go to the golf course a couple times a week, and 2 or 3 years in, they are like, all right, now what? What do I do now? Because the money's there, right? They have enough money that they're not going to run out. That's not an issue. They don't have any sort of underlying purpose that's driving them. And I think that if you can have a longer, more sustainable career, one, it's healthier, just mentally, but also it gives you that purpose that a lot of us are driven towards. I think both people in finance, in my space, and also providers are focused on helping make other lives better. And if you kind of all of a sudden get to a point in close to retirement, you just rip that piece out of the puzzle, there's going to be a piece of your personality that kind of goes missing. And I think that is something to recognize as an entrepreneur. It is a lot easier in a way to kind of build your own path to get to something that's more sustainable, rather than being an employee and them just throwing on responsibilities whether you want them or not. So there are a lot of, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things about being an entrepreneur that's stressful and at times may not feel like it was the best idea. But long term, I feel that it's a much more sustainable long term path.
Yeah. And in my mind, as someone who helps people with burnout and has walked through burnout, that career sustainability is such an important piece that we oftentimes leave up to chance, and we sort of say like, well, they're telling me I have to do more, so I'm going to do more. And we don't take that ownership of, is this a project I want to take on? Is this something I want to be responsible for? Or if they're asking me to do this, what am I going to ask them to take off of my plate as I take on this new role and this new project and this new set of responsibilities? And the other piece that you mentioned, that sense of fulfillment, like feeling like we have purpose and we're contributing to the world. I think we put too many eggs in the basket of working in medicine. And we say, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what offers me this sense of contributing to the world and fulfillment. And also, this thing is unbelievably demanding and I can't do it for the next 50 years. And so when we step away from that for, other pursuits, for retirement, even just to take a step back because we feel burned out, sometimes we feel adrift, like we're not quite sure who we are without medicine, which is a huge piece of our purpose. And, we feel called to do, which is a big deal.
Yeah. And I think that where we're at, we live in a unique piece in history of we have the ability to do, be an entrepreneur. It's never, like I said, never been easier. And a lot of things we can do remotely. So, you don't even need to be in the same location as you are now. You can travel, you can do all sorts of different cool things. And the other piece of the puzzle too is whenever you're trying to evaluate if I want to go down this path or not, a lot of times people are worried about what does it look like if I fail or if this doesn't work out. I don't really know a scenario where if you go to an employer and let's say you ran your own business for 2 or 3 years, I don't know a scenario where that makes you less marketable to a company. And the reason being is that you have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to figure out how to be efficient. You have to figure out how to allocate resources. You have to figure out all of these soft skills that, maybe you don't get trained as a PA to do. And especially if you're working in private practice, they're going to love that. And so, being able to run your own business isn't just, doing the work, that's your primary focus. It's also doing all the other things behind the scenes that just kind of make you more well-rounded. So if there's a point in time where you, maybe it's not working out, or maybe you're just, you've kind of reached your peak as an entrepreneur and you're like, I'm kind of ready to get back into, kind of more like W-2 lifestyle. I think the risks are less than what people think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of that is tied up with not wanting to fail. And so not trying, because if you don't try, then you can't fail, right? So maybe you have this idea of a business, maybe you have this idea of something you could do to serve people or to serve the world. And you think, well, if I try it and I tell people I'm trying it and then it doesn't work out, then I have to sort of cop to that failure. But to me, I feel like the bigger failure is not trying, like having this idea that could be incredible and just saying, oh, well, I better stay in my lane as an employee and do what someone else says and go to work and earn money for someone else. That was a big thing for me when I first started my business. I sort of was referring to it in a way of like, oh, like just a little podcast or just a little hobby. And, now I feel like, and this is a relatively recent thing, like our podcast has been on the air for coming up on 5 years. And that I have started saying, like, this is a business. This is a revenue generating thing. This is something that I am doing, which helps to support my family. And it's not a little anything. I think we're minimizing our ability to make an impact in that way too.
Yeah, the more confidently you talk about something, the more likely it becomes a reality as well. So I think that that's a very important. I mean, as an entrepreneur, the mental game is probably unlike any other. Like, it's far different than being a W-2 employee where you just kind of, wake up and go to work, and you're there for your set schedule. I mean, work does follow you around. That is maybe a good and a bad thing with entrepreneurship. But the other side of it is that it really does give you a lot of confidence, just to kind of, be able to say, hey, this is what I've built, this is what I've done, and you have something to show for it. So I think that piece of the puzzle is really impactful just from a mental health standpoint as well. If you can build a successful business, it's going to feel way better that you've built it and earned it yourself rather than you working for somebody else and them being generous enough, so to speak, to pay you a paycheck. And I think that is, even if the dollar amounts initially are smaller, the value that you feel getting those dollars is super impactful and more sustainable too.
Yeah, and there is something to be said for, I built this and I am the owner of it, and both, I mean, that's some days that feels really good and some days that feels like, oh man, like this is entirely mine and it's all my fault if it's not going well or if things aren't working out. But I think, if you are feeling sort of like you've been confined by medicine or by the things that you have been sort of offered the opportunity to participate, like you get to choose what opportunities you take advantage of when it's you earning money for you, when it's you making the decisions for yourself. And that is, both heavy and freeing.
Yeah. And at the beginning part of being an entrepreneur, right, you're just trying to, replace your salary or make a salary, right? And that's the beginning piece of it. But as you grow a business, you actually have an ability to create tangible value that you could theoretically sell later on down the road. Whereas as a typical employee, right, you don't really have any sort of tangible asset that you've built that can be sold if you want to later on. So I think that that's another piece of the puzzle as well of, you are building something that's more long-term that does have, internal value that may not be as easily quantifiable as maybe, income coming in, but it is a separate piece of the puzzle that you do have to factor into the equation if you're looking to build something that's more of a sustainable or bigger practice, so to speak.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think was really helpful to me in a season of burnout was that entrepreneurship and, starting this show and starting to serve people used a completely different part of my brain. And that there's something to be said for the variety and showing up differently in the world than the way that you show up clinically that has a different value. And that has really been I think has increased the sustainability of both entrepreneurship and also being an entrepreneur alongside being a clinician for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So if people would like to learn more about working with you, about becoming a client of yours, if they are listening to this and they're like mid-career entrepreneur clinicians, which is, by the way, me as well, and I am a client of Caleb's, where can they go to learn more and find out, where they can work with you?
Yeah, so they can head over to my website, advancedpracticeplanning.com, and click to schedule a free consultation. And at the end of the consultation, we'll either figure out if it's right to work together, or if there's a different person or a different service that you need that's even outside of what I can provide. I'll be sure to make sure that whatever route you choose, that you can get the advice that you need. So I work with clients both in a project-based capacity. So if you're just looking for, I call it like a financial checkup, it's kind of akin to going and getting your annual physical. I have a project-based service. Or if you're looking for more of someone that is a personal trainer that's helping you along the way make decisions, that's an ongoing service as well. So like I said, that's my focus. I want to work with the right people and make sure that we're advancing the profession here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
I love any conversation that reminds us that we are in charge of the way that we make changes in our lives, whether that is pivoting to entrepreneurship, getting ready to go part-time, or making any big move, change, or switch in your life. I am so grateful that we have guests come on the show and share their knowledge and expertise and let us know how to create more financial margin in our lives so we'll be better prepared when these opportunities present themselves. That's all for today. This PA is out. Congratulations. You've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.